Do you know the name Ashley Moody? Well, if you care at all about Florida State trying to leave the ACC, you should.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching, carousel, the portal, and more. We've always got you covered. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 whether you win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get yourself started. We'll talk Arch Manning because he made some noise in the spring game for Texas. Does that mean anything? And some of the biggest names lately to enter the transfer portal. All that coming up here on today's show. But we start with Florida State. Who in the world, Spencer, is Ashley Moody? Why should anybody care? Well, she is the Attorney General in the state of Florida. And she is now publicly expressing support for Florida State in their legal action against the ACC to leave the conference. So this is a really notable development because I think it says two things. Number one, that there is now extra legal backing and perhaps an extra element of public pressure that is inserted into this conversation. And number two, I think this speaks to the solid nature of Florida State's legal case and the likelihood that they and Clemson are going to be able to win. Now, this is just pertaining to Florida State, but the reason I say that is because Ashley Moody is a public figure. She's a public servant. She's a politician. At some level, a politician is not going to insert herself into a losing situation. She wouldn't, I don't think she would be getting involved here if she did not feel, number one, that there was a sound legal argument, or number two, that she could benefit from it in some way. That's how politicians work. They're going to try to pick winning cases, winning arguments, winning issues, whatever it is. They want to be on the right side of it, on the winning side of it. So her publicly getting involved here, I think, is really, really telling. So, per the Tallahassee Democrat, this isn't the first time that Moody has addressed the case, as in January, she asked the ACC for copies of the ESPN agreement, a contract that has been shrouded in secrecy during the trial. In the April 22nd hearing, that was on Monday, FSU's legal team said that the Attorney General has yet to receive the documents, but that was something she was looking for. In her letter to the 6 Attorney Generals, Moody said that the next step for the state of Florida would be to take action in FSU's case with the ACC in North Carolina, with her primary concern centered around sovereign immunity, which protects states and state entities from legal action. Moody wrote the North Carolina judge ruled that FSU waived its sovereign immunity against being sued due to its membership with the ACC, who is a private entity in North Carolina. So that's where this case is taking place, and she's trying to get involved and say, yeah, Florida State, we want to help facilitate the move out of the conference. So I think it's an incredibly notable development that the Attorney General of the state of Florida is now willing to stick her neck out there and support FSU's legal case. Now, does this affect the timeline? Not necessarily, because my suspicion, and I'm far be it from me to be a legal expert, I'm just giving you what my gut feeling and opinion is based on, looking and talking about this stuff for the last 2 years, really, at this point. I think there will be a settlement. There will be a dollar amount that FSU and Clemson will pay to leave the ACC, and then other schools either will or won't be willing to pay said dollar amount to try to get into the Power 2, which is the Big Ten and the SEC. Like, it's really the Power 2 and the next two, even with Florida State and Clemson in there. I think it gives the ACC, obviously, flag-carrying institutions, big brands, great football programs, and everything of the sorts. You lose them, and the ACC would still be above, the Mountain West or the Sun Belt or anything like that, or, whatever a Pac-12 rebuild could probably be. But Would it be in the power level? No, it's not. And there's been some talk lately about the Big Ten and the SEC and, well, what were they actually doing? Why are they, forming these committees? Are they going to find solutions to all this sort of stuff? And it just looks like the timeline's going to continue getting extended here. Now, maybe the Attorney General in Florida is getting involved because she feels she can help bring resolution to the matter, which, hey, more power to you. Because at this point, as I've talked about before here on the show, we just want to know. Like, can we just know? Are they going to be able to leave? Is that a legally sound case, or are they bound to the ACC? And we'll revisit this in 2027 because that's when ESPN could decide to opt out and renegotiate the TV deal that they have with the ACC. Can you just do it already? Just do it already, one way or the other. But I think they're working towards finding a settlement number. And if you're the ACC, I think it's in their best interest to settle and move on because the longer you wait, the antsier schools get. I don't think there's a ton of buzz right now internally. I'm sure there's a little bit more than it feels like in the public space, but around programs like Miami or North Carolina or NC State or Virginia Tech or, Virginia, anyone else that could try to be on the move if the ACC kind of starts to crumble, Duke falls into that conversation as well, then the longer you make them wait, the more likely I think they would, try to seek a way out because nobody likes the instability. Nobody likes that unsettling feeling of, well, do we have a home? Do we have a place? What's happening here? They want security. They want assurance. And that's what the ACC can't provide them right now. They can't give them a concrete plan because they're still trying to figure out what to do with their top two brands. Now, if you're the ACC, you are, of course, trying to keep Florida State and Clemson around because, well, duh. It's not in your best interest to see them leave. I just think that seems inevitable at this point, and you got to just come to a number and, take your lumps and move on and try to keep the league alive as best you can. But one other thing I was thinking about when, reading up on all this stuff for the show today is, where are Florida State and Clemson going? My guess would be the Big Ten. But has there been any indication in a significant way that the Big Ten or the SEC are chomping at the bit for FSU or Clemson? They have to see the television value. It's of course there. If FSU and Clemson leave the ACC, massive television ratings hit to the Atlantic Coast Conference. That much is plain and obvious. But are we sure? Like, do we know for certain which league they'd go to? I've talked about it here on the show before, and I can see them going to either league, but this all feels right now one-sided. Now, things can change in a hurry. You can go very quickly from, well, nothing's going to happen, or this is going to happen, to the exact opposite's going to happen. Or if you thought nothing was going to happen, something was going to happen. Like, we just woke up one day and USC and UCLA left the Pac-12. Like, oh, well, that was quick. But I haven't seen an extensive amount, I'll say, or a real substantive amount of posturing or communication or messaging from the Big Ten or SEC that, hey, FSU and Clemson, we're rooting for you. We're rooting for you. We're ready for you. Whenever you want to get over here, we'll open the door for you. You just got to get out of there. You get out of that crazy house over there in the ACC, and we'll have a place for you here. I don't know. Maybe internally they feel, if they come available, fine. We'll see if we can get them on the cheap because they'll be in a desperate situation. But if they don't, don't need them. Because guess what? They don't. And that's the scary part that kind of looms like a dark cloud hanging over all of this, which is, the Big Ten and the SEC, they don't need anybody else. And the, catastrophic fear for a long time has been, well, would the ACC just... or would the Big Ten and the SEC, rather, would they break away? Would they form their own sport? Would they leave everybody else behind? It'd be terrible. It'd be awful. It'd be an absolute disaster for the sport. I don't think there's any other way to see that. But is it technically possible? Sure. Maybe it is. But if they can come up with a revenue structure that works and they just, expand the playoff and it's dominated by the Big Ten and the SEC, that'd be better than the Big Ten and the SEC just, separating off altogether. So I wonder where they'd end up, because I don't see a bunch of appetite there, but there is very clearly an appetite, obviously, for them to leave the ACC. But that's the latest development. You got politicians involved. Fun stuff. We're going to talk about actual football. Arch Manning. That's an actual football player. And boy, did he look good. Before we get to the Longhorns, we get to Monopoly Go. And if you haven't gotten there, you should, because I've been told that I'm a competitive person. You may be a competitive person. Sports fans generally are competitive people, and we all have a competitive side. My competitive side, big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. That's a lot. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is messing with your friends. You can charge them rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly. You can heist their vaults of riches for yourself, and the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. It's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with your friends and people all around the world as well to earn huge rewards. So get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. So Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which again, like Monopoly Go, I'm a big fan of. So you can now get tickets even faster and easier on Game Time. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They've got killer last minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. With all that, Game Time just takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you want. And the lowest price guarantee that Game Time has, they guarantee that, because if they don't give you the lowest price, Game Time will credit you 100% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Arch Manning was the star of Texas's spring game. And it's great for 2025. That's what I think anyway. Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. His name generates all the buzz. I think the epitome of Arch Manning, Chris, is when Quinn Ewers was there. There's that picture of him sitting at the podium for ahead of the Sugar Bowl last year against Washington, and nobody's around, and everyone's flocked around Arch Manning, who of course wasn't going to go play in the game. Is that all this is with Arch Manning delivering a good performance in the spring game?
So first thing, I was in that scrum. I interviewed with the Texas guys, but I was in that group around Arch over on the sideline. And no, look, he's the real deal. I mean, he was a highly touted recruit. I did have some people tell me, he played at Newman, which is a weird school in New Orleans to really get a good read on, because yes, all the Mannings played there, and Odell Beckham played there in high school, but it's inferior competition they're going up against. Like, they're better than everybody on the field typically. And so I had some people tell me that they had some questions about Arch coming out. They're like, look, he looks great against all these little kids, but like, we don't really know until he gets to the next level what he's going to look like. But look, last year, late in the year, the Texas Tech game, he gets in late. The fans are going absolutely psychotic, just screaming and yelling, and Archmania is on. But I think him and the Mannings have done a good job of saying from the get-go, we're okay with Arch redshirting his first year. We're okay with Arch sitting and learning and waiting his turn. And they've done that. There's been no talk of him hitting the transfer portal or anything like that. So I'll say he's done everything right to this point. The only thing I'm a little upset with was Sark. I thought Sark, even with Quinn Ewers coming back, that he should have just said this was an open competition and say, look, Quinn's got to go earn it. We get it. He's the veteran and he's been the starter the last 2 years. But also, Quinn Ewers has gotten hurt each of the last 2 years. He's missed 5 games. They've had to play the backup quarterback in some big games. And so, and to be honest with you, on the biggest stages last year in the game against Oklahoma, he crapped on himself. He threw 2 picks early on, and they were lucky enough to take the lead late, but then Oklahoma goes down and they win it. That happened. And then in the Sugar Bowl, I was there and watched Quinn Ewers stunk up the joint, completed like 55% of his passes. And yeah, he tried to rally him late in the final minute, but dude, the damage was done. Like, Washington's defense just made you look silly. I think he had just 1 touchdown in the game. So I'm not saying this to hate on Quinn Ewers. I think he can come back and be very good. Now, he is replacing his entire receiving core, basically. All his big contributors from last year, and A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. And, reports have been good. Isaiah Bond from Alabama's looked very good. Matthew Golden from Houston. Silas Bolden from Oregon State. And then you had Jonte Cook, who played in the spring game this past week. He looks really good. He was a freshman a year ago. Ryan Wingo, the 5-star freshman, looks incredible. So he's got weapons, but I just don't know why Sark was so quick to go, no, it's Quinn. Everybody else is fighting for number 2. And then Arch goes out there and looks incredible in the spring game, had poise in the pocket, looked calm, looked confident, all this stuff. And, again, it's like, oh, yeah, well, I know Quinn played limited. I know he threw a pick 6 on the first play, but Quinn's still the starter and Arch is the backup. I'm just warning you now, if Quinn Ewers gets hurt at any point this season and Arch comes in and he starts tearing it up and he's the real deal, Quinn Ewers is going to get Wally pipped because I don't know how you pull Arch out if he's tearing it up. Again, we'll see, but the Arch hype so far, he's lived up to the hype.
Well, I think that Steve Sarkisian's thinking along those lines is I don't want to deal with Arch mania. I don't want to go, and feed that potential, that thought, that idea of, wait, could it be Arch Manning? Could we have another Manning? That's football royalty. That is American football royalty right there. That is the crown prince, heir to the throne of what has already been well established by 2 generations and 3 different Mannings at the quarterback position. So I think he wants to, kind of tamp things down and just keep it, straightforward so he doesn't have to deal with all that sort of stuff. And look, Quinn Ewers is top 5 in Heisman. I think he's actually tied for first in the preseason Heisman odds for a reason. I'm really high on Quinn Ewers. I think he's really good. And no, he didn't have his best game in the Sugar Bowl against Washington last year, but going into his 3rd year with the Longhorns as a starter, I think he has got all the potential in the world to lead Texas as far as they want to go. But certainly, Chris, he's not going to be able to do that alone. He needs a team around him, and Texas has had not a high volume, but a high quality of additions in the transfer portal, and they added another one recently, Bill Norton from Arizona, who comes over to play on the interior of that defensive line. They lost a couple NFL players in there, and I think getting Norton is a really, really good move up front.
Yeah, Norton's a guy who was a reserve at Georgia for the first few years of his career and then went over to Arizona last year. He's a big space eater, over 300 pounds, can play the middle of that D-line. The guy they're really excited about is the kid they got over from UTSA earlier this offseason, Trey Moore, a kid who had 14 sacks last year at UT San Antonio. So they're excited about him. I know Norton, they were concerned about filling up some size on that D-line. He certainly helps fill that role. So we'll see. Again, there's a lot of guys on that defense that they lose, and that's where I've kind of had my big, question mark with this team as they head, into this season in the SEC, where the schedule gets tougher. Is that everybody's picking them already as it's them in Georgia, and I'm like, can we wait and see what Texas looks like? Again, we like Quinn Ewers, but that's a lot of new weapons, and there's a big C word you got to have. It's called chemistry. He had chemistry with A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, so. They got to figure that out. But again, you lose all these pieces, Tavondre Sweat, all these big pieces on the defense. You got to replace them. Let's see who the guys behind them are. And then again, you step up in competition. I mean, this ain't playing Baylor and Kansas. This is Georgia. This is, big bad SEC teams you're going to have to play.
They got to go on the road and play Michigan this year.
Yeah, and Michigan, I know, loses a ton, but still going to the Big House is one of the toughest places to play. So, although Fox did do them a favor announcing this week, that's going to be an 11 a.m. Central game. So, maybe not as rocking as it would be a night game. Great job on that.
I don't think it's going to be quiet.
Certainly. But I'll just say this. My buddy, who is a diehard Texas fan, I said, where does Quinn Ewers rank for you on the all-time, quarterback list, or at least since he's been a fan? And he said he ranks somewhere probably around Sam Ehlinger. And I was like, man, that's okay, he's fine. But he's not Colt McCoy, and that's certainly not Vince Young. And so when you kind of slotting him, it's what kind of season is he going to have? Does he take that next step? Look, he could have a Colt McCoy-like season, get him to the championship and all that. But if he doesn't, there's going to be a lot of people looking back going, maybe we should have just started Arch. Now, especially if they get 2 losses early. If they get to the midpoint of the season and they're 4-2 or 5-2, certainly fans are going to be going, look, playoffs probably off the table here. And Quinn's been, every touchdown he throws an interception. Let's turn to Arch.
So one other thing in the transfer portal I noticed is someone is leaving Texas, and it wasn't necessarily an expected move. What can you tell us there?
Yeah, one of their defensive backs, Terrence Brooks, was a starter. I mean, played in the spring game this past weekend, but he entered the transfer portal on Monday, and a lot of people are wondering, like, what's that about? Well, Anwar Richardson, who covers the Longhorns for Orange Bloods, he put out there Wednesday morning, said, I was told Texas decided to part ways with Terrence Brooks. He said, it doesn't sound like there was any hostility with the decision, but he said the expectation from inside the building is one Longhorn player will enter the transfer portal by Wednesday or Thursday, and that's Terrence Brooks. So don't really know the whole story there, but something had to happen because, again, that was a guy that was expected to be a starter in the secondary.
That to me sounds like Texas feels really good about someone who is on the depth chart behind him. That's just the way it comes off for me. There are a lot of things that go into making a transfer portal decision one way or the other. But, you know, sir, I like what you brought up about Texas. Like, let's see what they are first. They've got the highest win total in all of college football with Ohio State, Georgia, and Oregon at 10.5. And, you know, I think they are worthy of that sort of designation. Certainly, though, they do have questions. I think the perimeter and the chemistry questions you brought up are absolutely on the money there, and we'll see what they end up doing in the secondary. Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC, keeping us up to date as always. Thank you, Chris.
Anytime.
Do you want more portal chatter? You got it coming because names have gone into the portal that you need to know. First, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 whether you win or lose. You don't actually have to be right. You just have to do it. Just do things. Like the Joker said circa 2008, RIP Heath Ledger. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, everything you want, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. That is a great trifecta right there. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. Well, the transfer portal is open until April 30th, and that's just for players to go in. They can exit the portal anytime that they choose. So names have gone into the portal. Names have come out of the portal. Here's one I really did not expect to see.
Colorado running back Dylan Edwards has decided to enter his name into the college football transfer portal after just 1 year in Boulder. I'm Kevin Borba, host of Locked On Buffs, and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about Dylan Edwards. His recruitment, it was a whirlwind. The number 224th player in the country, number 12 running back, and number 2 player in the state of Kansas. He committed to 3 different schools. Initially committed to in-state Kansas State, flipped to Notre Dame, and then at the last minute flipped to Colorado after Coach Prime was hired. He made an immediate impact for the Colorado Buffaloes during his freshman season, rushing for 321 yards and a touchdown while also adding 36 catches for 299 yards and 4 scores through the air. He's someone that could do a little bit of everything. He's super fast, ran track for Colorado, and this year was expected to play a lot more receiver than running back. According to Pat Shermer, they were going to use him a little differently just to get the ball in his hands in open space. If your team lands him, get him the ball in open space and let him do the rest. He will make people miss, he will outrun people, and he will make them look silly. Dylan Edwards is one of the hottest commodities in the transfer portal, and if your team gets him, they're getting one of the fastest players in the country, and they're getting a dynamic weapon, lightning in a bottle, everything in between. Dylan Edwards will be a star.
Yeah, Dylan Edwards is going to start and play somewhere at some position. Now, he could be a flex player. He could be a hybrid running back receiver. He could be, almost exclusively receiver, gadget guy, jet sweeps, screen passes, whatever you want to do. He could be a factor in the return game. This guy can do everything. Now, I did not think he was going into the transfer portal. Now, Colorado did just add Dallin Hayden, the transfer from Ohio State. So maybe he looks at that as an obstacle to playing time. But given, as Kevin alluded to, the host of Locked On Buffs, a move to wide receiver, that struck me as curious. That struck me as curious, but someone is going to benefit from this move. Does this hinder Colorado? It removes a playmaker from an offense that has a lot of them. That's, I think, the most accurate and fair way to put it, which is, of course, how I always try to be here when talking about Colorado. It can be hard to find people that are, telling it like it is, being down the middle. I try to do just that. this is a move that doesn't radically shift my opinion of the Buffs. But if they were to suffer an injury in the backfield, say, to Dallin Hayden, or if they lost one of their receivers on the outside, then I would look and go, boy, Dylan Edwards could have helped there. Instead, he's going to go and help somebody else. So if your team gets him, that's a guy who has just got all class speed, all world speed. He is, as Kevin said, a track guy. Get him the ball and let him do the rest. That is a big time playmaker to have in the transfer portal. You know who blocks for guys like Dylan Edwards? Guys like this.
Hey there, folks. It's me again, Kenton Gibbs with Locked On ACC. And I'm here today to talk to you all about Big Zach Owens, 6'6", 375-pound tackle out of Clemson, entering the transfer portal. Now, he was not a major contributor last year in his freshman year as he redshirted, only played about 13 snaps in total on offense. But I'm telling you, for a Clemson offensive line that already had some questions about their depth and talent overall, this is going to be a loss. And Owens is going to get plenty of interest in the portal. We're interested to see how all this plays out. And stay tuned with Locked On ACC, where we'll be sure to keep you up to date on all the latest happenings in portal combat.
Kenton rocking the shades inside. My man is just too cool for school. Obviously, because Kenton is indeed one of the coolest cats around. But I think that Zach Owens going into the transfer portal is just going to be another marker. It's just another kind of, not feather in the cap, it's another chalk mark on a prison wall, perhaps, of, is this going to be another instance of, hey, Dabo Swinney, you got to utilize the portal. This is a guy who could have started this year, followed a more traditional recruiting timeline and trajectory, and guess what? Those are the guys that Dabo Swinney wants to have around the program. Doesn't really want guys that just come in as mercenaries in the transfer portal. This is the sort of guy, and he's transferring out. If Clemson has offensive line difficulties at all this year, remember this one. Remember this one right there. Speaking of offensive linemen, we're going to hear from another Locked On host about a big name in that particular position group. Jason Zandamela is a guy that committed to USC in the class of 2024. Clemson had a guy do this to them on the defensive side of the ball. And he's in the transfer portal right here, right now. Highly rated 4-star recruit, originally from the state of Florida. Zandamela has had Florida reach out to him. And he was someone who was the number 4 interior offensive lineman in the class of 2024. He's a top 125 player nationally, overall, regardless of position. He never even took a snap at USC. What changed? I don't know. You tell me. I think USC is going to be good. I love what USC's done in the portal on the defensive side of the ball. But here they're taking a little bit of a loss. So he's from Florida originally. His recruitment came down to USC and Florida State, ended up choosing USC, so don't count out the Seminoles here to go after someone who will be a true freshman. This is essentially a new high school recruitment in the transfer portal, which is just weird, but that's where we're at in college football right now. But Florida reportedly had him on campus for a visit. This is one of the most highly coveted transfer portal targets right now, particularly when it comes to the offensive line. But another one who is going to land somewhere and make an impact out of Tuscaloosa.
This is Jimmy Stein from Locked On Bama. James Brockermeyer, Alabama center, has entered the transfer portal. A little bit of a surprise. I don't think Alabama staff was surprised today by this knowledge. I think they knew this was coming as of recently. But it is a little bit of a surprise because Brockermeyer was such a big story this spring. Made huge improvements, up to 295 pounds. Size had always been a thing with James in the past, but now up to 295. Had a nice opportunity this spring because projected starter Parker Brailsford, the transfer from Washington, missed a lot of the back end of spring practice. James did really well. Even some of the defensive linemen he went up against this spring noted how much he had improved. I think probably what's happened here is James wants some sort of an assurance going into year 4 that he's going to be the starter. That's likely not the case with all Pac-12 center Parker Brailsford transferring to Alabama. James still would have been the underdog to Parker in their battle this fall. Probably in the end, Brockermeyer just wanted some assurances. Hey, I'm in year 4. I'm ready to be a starter. I proved this spring I'm ready to be a starter. At Alabama, you had 2 guys ready to be a starter, and that's likely the reason that James Brockermeyer entered the portal with a no contact tag, which means James entered the portal knowing where he's going. yet to be seen. But all that matters for Alabama is what's going to happen at center in Tuscaloosa. Parker Brailsford still with the team. He's fine per the coaches, and he is the anticipated starter this fall. It will be interesting to see if Alabama looks for some center depth in the portal with 1 week to go.
So you might hear, well, Brockermeyer wasn't good enough, couldn't beat out Parker Brailsford. Just because you're not good enough to start over a guy that was a revelation along the best offensive line in college football. Going into last year, Washington had 0 questions at their tackle positions. They had Troy Fautano, who's about to get drafted in the first or second round of the NFL draft, and they had Roger Rosengarten, who will also get selected probably in the later rounds. Their questions were on the interior, particularly at center, and it became very clear, very quickly, that Parker Brailsford was not only not a liability, it was a plus. It was a strength. So not being able to start over that guy doesn't give me any pause at all about what Brockermeyer could do. So if your team is looking for a starting center or think that you could upgrade at that position, Brockermeyer is going to be one of those highly coveted names. I mentioned Zandamela from USC. That's certainly going to be an offensive lineman who goes to another power school and makes an impact. But Brockermeyer, when you hear that it's a little bit of a surprise coming out of Alabama, a lot of talent on that roster. And Brailsford is a guy who I think is really, really good. And there's no shame whatsoever not being able to start over him. So I think that is a really, really notable name to be in the transfer portal right now. Beyond curious to see where he gets picked up, because that's a plug-and-play day one starter and not just a guy who's going to hold his own. I think that's a plus player. That's a plus player along the offensive line. You just have a plus player in Parker Brailsford and Tuscaloosa. So James Brockermeyer in the transfer portal, boy, it just doesn't stop, does it? Absolutely not. Nor does the coverage you get here at Locked On College Football. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.